And joining us now, Times managing editor Rick Stengel, who is here to reveal the latest issue of Time magazine. Of course, the cover.
The cover is about Japan's meltdown. The tragedy in Japan is a picture of a young woman in the evacuation district near Fukushima. And, we have three stories really about the trifecta of what's going on in Japan, the actual nuclear disaster, Japanese resilience in the face of that disaster, and about the future of nuclear power around the world and in the U.S. But it's a tragic situation. In fact, that one of the main stories is by our Beijing correspondent, Hannah Beach, who's half Japanese, who's been there pretty much since the tsunami, talking about Japanese resilience and about the fact that this is a culture where people pull for each other, where the group is more important than the individual, and you don't see the kind of hand-wringing and conspicuous tears that you see in the U.S. with any disaster, and that's odd for Americans to see.
Your headline says earthquake, tsunami, nuclear disaster, resilience, as you bring up, but this is a country that has been just torn up. I mean, set back in time. How yes, you can be resilient, but to what at this
Yes,
point?
well, it's a country that has been defined by disaster. It's perched on the edge of a continent. There have been earthquakes and tsunamis all the way back. We have a beautiful woodcut from 1836 about a tsunami that they had then. So they do look at themselves as a people that's always perched on the edge of disaster, and that is how they define themselves. And that resilience comes from all of that history. Of course, you remember, we have pictures also from World War II and the firebombing of Tokyo, which actually eerily resembles what some of those cities around Fukushima look like now. So the Japanese people, I believe, are resilient. And you even hear quotes. We have lovely quotes from people saying, maybe not in my children's generation, but in my grandchildren's generation, we'll come back.
Donnie and John, stand by. We have Kelly O'Donnell in Washington who wants to jump in. Kelly.
Well, I'm just wondering, does your reporting suggest that resilience also has a component of being willing and even eager to have all this international support come in to help them? And when they are so crippled internally and not having the communication that makes information get from person to person, do you get any sense culturally of how that may be playing out?
Well, Kelly, it's a good question, because the same thing that makes them resilient is also the same thing that makes them resistant to outside help. They stand together and they follow rules very well, but they're not necessarily very creative in the face of a tragedy like this. The other thing is, the irony is, how do you give aid to one of the richest countries in the world? We're used to sending aid to places where people really need it. The Japanese are a wealthy people per capita, and so there aren't natural ways for us to actually give aid to them, and they're not very receptive to it either. It's a much more closed society.
I'm sorry.
Johnny?
We talked earlier about, and you mentioned as far as kind of the group notion of this culture and the resiliency and non-confrontational nature, which I've dealt with in business as I've worked with Japanese companies. The fact that in this country, if we weren't giving the right information, we'd be standing, we'd be screaming, and that problem would correct itself. So does this in some way end up backfiring on them as far as not holding their leaders as accountable as they should be?
I think that's something that is worth talking about, right? They do trust in corporations. There's so many quotes from people saying, well, they told us that it was safe, and now we hear that it's not. There has been a limited amount of information that Japanese citizens have gotten, much less what we're getting. So yes, I think it does. It helps in terms of cohesion. It hurts in terms of creativity and adaptability.
John Meacham.
Rick, what did you have to say about American nuclear power?
Well, we have a great story by Mike Grunwald, whom you know, John, and he talks about the irony is that this is not going to be a setback to American nuclear power because of the dangers in Japan. The problem is the cost of nuclear power in America. It's exorbitant. In other countries, in China, in Japan, it's paid for by the government. Here, it's private equity with support from the government. And what Mike found is that the $10 billion plus for new nuclear reactors, Wall Street doesn't want to support it. It's just too much, and taxpayers don't either. So that is what will kill nuclear power in America, not the danger, but the cost.
Oh, we've got some incredible photographs in here.
Oh, and I forgot to mention, Jim Knockway, the great war photographer, is down there for us, and we have a 6-page photo spread of Jim's pictures that are incredibly moving and powerful. And also, we have a fantastic story by Jeff Kluger. It basically says now I don't know what's happening right this moment at the reactors, but the fear that Americans have in people buying iodine is really just silly.
That is a whole side story.
There's a lot more radiation you get from a chest X-ray than you're going to get from
Time Magazine, Japan's Meltdown, another great issue.